Welcome to Synced on Air. I'm Angelique with Synced, and today I have Mike Watts, who is newly joined Synced with us, and he is going to introduce our guest speaker. Over to you, Mike.
Today, our special guest is Matt Grimmer. He's the sales executive for Top Green, and Top Green is a digital solutions provider that combines the power of AI with human expertise. And we're excited to dive into the products that Top Green's offering the landscaping industry and hear Matt's insights. So please join me in welcoming Matt to the show.
Woo!
Hi guys.
Welcome, Matt.
How you doing?
Great.
Awesome. Yeah, a little bit about myself. I don't know. Top Green has been pretty new to the market as of July. I am actually fairly new to the landscape industry directly. Before this, I worked with a water restoration and repair company and did a lot of scheduling, maintenance of crews, and a lot of integration of crew-based softwares to make those things more efficient, which is kind of why I was tapped to help develop this product for Top Green and kind of roll out the initial sales. So that's kind of where I come from. I do have family and friends that are deep in the landscape industry, and they have given me lots of helpful insights on how a lot of this stuff works and kind of how we translate this into stuff that crews can use. So that's kind of where I come to this from.
That's really cool because, I do feel like any outdoor services company can really relate to the problems in the landscape industry. And water restoration work, I see that fitting, your things are complicated by weather, by people and travel and all that stuff. So really interesting and exciting that it's just launched in July. That's really cool.
It's been in development for a number of years. So the thing about this product is that it is something that has not been approached yet for the landscape industry. And in other industries where systems like this have been developed, they take a lot of development time because we automatically hear AI, okay, which is kind of the big buzzword of what is going to be coming up in the landscape industry and is already kind of being integrated into almost everything. And we automatically think that means that there is a sentient computer in the sky that does exactly what we want it to do and spit back exactly the information that we need, and that is not the case.
And hopefully it doesn't come to kill us.
Well, there's all of that baggage surrounding the terminology for AI as well, which is kind of baggage. Essentially, the AI properties that are used for things like this are a very high-level computing, in which it's running many, many operations and as a result starts to learn better and more efficient ways to do things. So AI in these cases is a giant calculator in that what you spit into it, it will spit back what is put into it. So developing that into a host of different ways that we can utilize that has really taken Sashi Yadnapur, who is the main developer of this and is the current CEO of Top Green. He spent many years kind of developing this organically, utilizing this type of software. So now that we're finally bringing a streetable version that is useful to landscape maintenance companies, it's been really exciting to kind of see this hit the market and start getting gears turning for people on how we can utilize these kind of things.
So why is it called Top Green? Is it built for the landscape industry, or okay, correct. I see you nodding. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So initially, this has been in some beta testing in various forms for the last 3 or 4 years, partnering with some of the larger landscape companies throughout the U.S., finding ways that we can manipulate it. And at that time, it was originally labeled Urban Eye before it actually had hit the market. Between then and when we've rolled out in July, we were acquired by a company called Touring AI, and we partnered with them because they were the best at what they did. And they also work in a similar sphere in so much as the data processing side on water management for a whole host of things. And that side of the company is called Top Clear. And they have been out a little bit longer than we have. And, we kind of learn about how our softwares can interact, as far as we've taken a lot of the architecture and framework for how they've been able to utilize this and now incorporate that. And it's really boosted the way that Top Green has been able to bring this to market and get this ready to really roll. So it's been very interesting. So we are Top Green, and we are a division of Touring AI.
Okay. Thanks for explaining that.
Are there any other tops out there? Is it just Top Clear and Top Green?
Top Clear and Top Green. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. And it's nice to have a nice simplified branding. When you think green, you think grass, especially in the landscape area. And kind of what we've developed really deals with, all of the basics of landscape maintenance. And so Top Green is a very good way to keep that front and center in our ethos as a company and in our mission to kind of help companies develop themselves, which is really what the software does.
Well, do you want to dive in and give us a little bit more about, make it granular, what the software helps you with? Awesome.
Absolutely. So in a broad view, what our company does is we take basic input points for an individual property, meaning a landscape maintenance company has within their portfolio, in many cases, hundreds and hundreds of properties. And they create estimates based on someone going out and looking at the general areas. And there are many different millions of ways that companies do that. What is not done as much by a majority of, I would say, medium to smaller size companies is the physical job planning on each one of those job sites. So for instance, a crew may go out and you may initially tell them, okay, we're going to be doing all of the grass and we're going to do all of these edges, and then we're going to blow everything off, and then we're going to soft edge these areas. And they kind of explain the general areas and they say, okay, you've got 6 hours to do that. Go. And the expectation is that at the end of that 6 hours, they've completed all of the work. Okay. Now, depending on a whole host of different things, possibly the estimator was under on some areas. So he's given the crew an unrealistic expectation of what they complete within that 6 hours.
Oh, that never happens.
Never happens, right? Never happens. Or conversely, you've booked 4 hours for a site that realistically the crew only needs 2 hours to do.
Okay.
And everything in between. And the goal is to make that chasm as short as humanly possible in a whole host of different ways. So what our software does is you plug the initial information in. It will map out the areas. It will identify all of the required areas that need the maintenance. It will map those. It will then assign the individual crew members where they need to specifically cut. And
wait, the software does this, so you don't have to.
Correct. So you don't have to do that.
Are you using satellite imagery and?
So it uses a host of things.
Okay.
There are a number of different companies which utilize satellite imagery and satellite-based networks to map out areas. That is something that is already widespread in the industry. What we do is take that one step further. We then let the software take that information and spit back an optimized way to work that job site. Okay.
So is it really so it's assigning the people and it's estimating like how long that person's going to need to trim?
Correct. So what it does, and this is something that people are already doing by hand, where they are taking something called a production factor,
Mm-hmm.
and that is assigned a whole host of different ways, but essentially it's a rate of speed of production based on the job that they are doing. What we do is we plop in the production rate we would like the crew to run at, and we have a set host of those production rates that are kind of just industry standard ones
Okay.
that a lot of people use. But we'll get into where Top Green will actually change that. So we take those standardized production rates, and the AI looks at all of the obstructions and the crews and the size of the mowers, and they basically say, okay, you need to work this area from this time to this time. And they create a chart which shows how long they should be working on those areas, and it attempts to optimize that they all finish at roughly the same time. Okay. And that is yep. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but this is so cool. So does it account for where you park your truck and trailer,
yes,
and where you're working, and if there's stairs, even if you have to go through a house?
Well, correct. So these are all things that have taken 3 or 4 years to develop how to teach the AI where all of those things are, right? And so, yes, it does do all of that. So
that is so cool.
It is very cool. And you can actually see an optimized path of motion, meaning this is where they should walk between areas and cut, right? So it gets very specific into those things. Now, are we saying that this is going to spit out this optimized plan and you're going to hand it to a crew and they are going to be able to look at this and instantly do that? No chance. Okay. No chance.
Okay, well, at least you're realistic.
And this would be true if you said, okay, guys, here is the absolute perfect way to do this. Now you should be able to go ahead and do that. Well, we all know that that's not exactly possible. Okay. So what this also does then is it creates training. It helps you understand what you should be doing. And that helps develop a way to train people to be able to do that. And it's a way in which to reinforce best practices on a lot of these job sites as it goes through. So that's the first half generally of what Top Green does. There is also a whole second half that we have developed, which proves out the planning. Meaning that, how do we know that these crews are doing what we're asking them to do? How do we know whether or not these production rates are correct? Because we all can understand that people work at different speeds, and it's really dependent on exactly what equipment you're using. Sometimes it's terrain-based. Sometimes it's the mower equipment that you have.
Sometimes it's their attention to detail.
Could be all of those things.
Yeah.
Correct. So we have developed a vest that the crews wear, which automatically breadcrumbs from the moment that they unplug that vest where they're at spatially, meaning when they arrive on job sites, it will also recognize what equipment they're using, and it will automatically breadcrumb all of the areas in which they work in real time. Okay, so now what the AI is going to be able to do as you continue to use the planning is, instead of that baseline production rate, you can say, what is my actual production rate on this crew? Well, they generally run at 7,200 feet per hour or 6,900 feet per hour. Well, now when you go to estimate that in whatever method that companies use, because they all use different versions, they have real-time production rates that are spit back from what the people are actually doing, right? So now we're closing that chasm.
Without manual data entry.
Without exactly. That's the biggest thing here, is that it's not that companies don't understand or see the value in this, and they are, in some cases, in very large companies, already doing things like this, but they are physically doing it manually by hand. Someone sits down, they take the map,
Painful.
they
Yeah.
figure out these are these people. Okay, this is my square footage. This is this area, so it should roughly take it this. Okay, what about travel? So they're planning that out, and then they're creating their own Gantt charts so
Yeah.
that they can optimize this. So the industry already understands that this is a gray area.
Yeah. It's just,
And
it's so painful to capture real data. But what about, if I'm that employee going, oh no, they're going to see that I go to the bathroom twice as many times as everybody else.
yeah, and we have, and obviously that is something that people are worried about. Where we approach that is, you are already observed on job sites in a host of different ways. Most companies have things that will GPS track where the cars are and things like that. There are no cameras on anything, so that we're not really concerned, and the companies are not really concerned about those small level areas of time: lunch, breaks, bathroom, in a lot of cases, cigarette breaks, 10-minute breaks,
Yeah.
whatever the case may be. Taking a rest because it's hot, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But what this does is it's spitting back at the end of the day a map that shows how much of the area was completed.
And that's what's important.
And that's what's important. And here's the other side, is that when we start utilizing this with crews and they understand that this isn't watching what they say or do or all of that, we're looking at the high level data of what was completed in an 8-hour day, right? The only time that would become a real issue is if you're taking a 3-hour lunch break at McDonald's, because it will show up that way.
Yeah.
And in those cases,
or you're severely underperforming regularly.
Or severely for some reason, right? And maybe it's not the fault. That's the other side of this too, is that when the data gets spit back and we start looking at, okay, they went out there today, our estimate said it was this much. The optimized plan is saying it's this much. They completed only 60% of the work. What's going on here? Well, then we can start looking at it. Okay, I can see exactly where we cut. Why did we miss these areas? Oh, it's because we couldn't get from here to here. Or, oh, I didn't have whatever the case may be. Well, that's all well and fine. That's very valid. But unless you know what's happening on these job sites, you can't address.
You can't improve. Yeah.
Right.
And can you? Oh, go ahead, Mike.
That's where the human element comes in, right? You need the context for everything. Otherwise, it's just data without any basis. Yeah.
Well, and can you manually put something in, like it doesn't show, but this is a problem, like I don't know, there's a sinkhole. I'm making up stuff, but like
100%, right. So once the plans are initially run, we have we are constantly kind of developing new tools as we're utilizing this, because we've been very fortunate to partner with a couple of very large companies that are utilizing the vests currently, and we are onboarding with some others that are very interested. We're running into the off season here, so we're really actually setting a lot of companies up with the planning to get rolling with everything in the springtime. And that's kind of where we've been dedicated these last couple months, and where we're seeing a ton of interest coming in. But obviously people kind of, especially tech-minded people, they want to get this in their hands because they like to see what's happening. And that's the other thing about this, is the way that we have created the architecture for this. It's more of a sandbox tool that can be used a whole host of different ways, right? And so once they start seeing that, I can use this to see, even so much. There's any way that you can think of, because there's no intervention needed between the crew and the equipment, meaning they don't have to pair this with anything. They don't have to sync it with a phone. They don't have to sync it with some other thing. They don't have to worry about a connection between the equipment.
It just happens.
It just happens. And so, and then the data that comes back, we can analyze a whole host of different ways. We can overlay the actual path of motions over the top of the existing plans and see where we're different. Maybe we find out that there are areas of the plan that we had estimated for, thought we were doing, and we really are doing more, Well, now you can take that and you can adjust that estimate. It also solves a whole host of problems for larger companies that do commercial property, which is where we're seeing the biggest interest right now.
Okay.
Let's say that Ms. McGillicuddy calls and says, I was here all day, nobody showed up, they didn't cut my area, and this didn't get cut. Okay, I'm really sorry, my apologies, let me check into it. Well, they can go in at the end of the day and look and see if that actually happened. And
Yeah.
you can address it directly with the customer. Ma'am, I have a path of motion showing them doing that area. Now, maybe they didn't do a very good job. We'll have to look at that and we can adjust that. And they can even then go in and see maybe the production rate jumped up, a ton between 705 and 805, and they just buzzed through this at twice the rate they normally do. Well, it'll be able to see that because, it's just information. So it's all in how.
And we need that in our industry without much hassle. And but well, I guess the other thing for me is, a lot of companies are paying money for CRMs and all kind of other software packages, and it's a thing. I think it's a thing that we're all getting to, like, okay, this is another thing.
Yes.
Does it
Correct.
plug into other software packages? Does it complement things? I mean, how are the current companies using it?
So in the industry, there are a number of large companies that are what I would call back of house management tools, which are very all encompassing. We all know the larger names of those companies, and Aspire and the general like, and those are encompassing all of the working functions of the back of house portions of it, right? And they do go into some things as far as scheduling so that they can integrate the estimates with their scheduling and, kind of utilize that functionality in that way. The difference here is that this is really a brand new style of tool, meaning that the things that this does are kind of a whole new way of looking at it. And every company that is utilizing this, has a different system that they use back of house, which creates a whole host of things, right? So it would be very nice to say that a simple plugin would take, let's say, the production rates or data and directly plug them into each one of these different softwares. The reality is that each one of those needs to be created individually. And so we have actually been approached by a whole host of different sections of the industry about some direct plugins to this kind of thing, because they all have to be mined and created individually, basically. And so again, this is part of this whole development process. The system that we have right now is really a standalone software and system. It is very akin to a calculator and tool that you use in conjunction with your other software. So yes, in that respect, at some point there will be some integration that will be more automatic in those regards. But again, what we're finding is that people are finding different uses for this in a whole host of ways, right? So as fast as we can develop ways this can plug into other things, they're going, well, what about this? I could use it for this. Can it give me that? Yes, it can, but again, it's a tool that is spitting back information that we have to have
never have had.
Correct.
Are any companies using this for billing purposes, for like hourly rate?
No, and we don't plug into that. What they are typically doing in cases is they are looking at the back end of how they're doing it, and then they're adjusting the way in which they estimate or bill, right? So what they could do, and what has been the use case, which I think will probably be coming up in the spring, being used pretty heavily, is they may go into some of these revolving accounts that they've been doing for years. And they may be looking at their overall profitability based on the hours that they've estimated and what's going on throughout the year. And they'd be going, listen, this is underperforming. We're really only making like 15% on this. What's the planning say we need? Okay, well, there's a pretty wide chasm there. All right, well, let's go out and actually run the cruise with this. And after a month or so of running it, we'll get a better idea of what the production rate really is. Well, now when you go back in to renegotiate that estimate or renew that estimate, you can sit down with them and say, look, we have to change it because of X, Y, and Z. Here's actually what it's taking to cut it. Here's actually what our guys are cutting. Here's what our estimate says. We're missing a whole bunch of areas. So we're going to correct those, and we're showing you why we're doing it. And we're telling you why, So again, you don't have to use it that way. But what happens is as we're onboarding these, people are going, man, this data can be used in a million different ways to kind of tailor what we're already doing.
Yeah.
And
well, I think we've always needed a way to track hours because, if you weren't an optimistic person, I don't think you'd run a landscape maintenance company.
Well, yes, exactly. And the other thing to touch on here with the crews and some of the evil word of tracking, which is a legitimate word, but it's kind of a non-nuanced way of putting what's happening there, right? Is that the better that the estimators can accurately provide a budget for a job, the easier it's going to be for the crews to run it without killing themselves, because that happens too. And then what happens is, let's say that something's underbid. Well, we got a year contract on it. We have to do it. And these are the areas we need to cut. And we now know it's taking this much more labor, is that they, just by default, you give them 10 hours, they're going to complete it in 10 hours. Yeah. It may not be 100% of the property. It may not be, so there's
but you've given them a deadline, and that's stressful too.
And that's stressful. Yeah, exactly.
It's stressful if they are working hard and somebody somewhere has underestimated it. That's a lot of pressure on the crews. That is not fair.
Is not fair, correct. And the other side of this is really recognizing that out of a company that may have 20 to 30 crews, there are operational differences between those crews. And it's not about,
because we're humans.
It's not about trying to increase a production factor in some extreme way, or hey, we're going to optimize this and then we're going to set it for 70 to 100 feet per minute for large turf or something like that, and they now need to hit that. That's what we're estimating based off of. That's not the goal of this. The goal would be to let them run it so that what their production factor actually is. Then when you go to estimate for that, it's more fair and balanced,
Despite that's not the goal, have you seen an increase in competition amongst the crews as a result of the tech, or is that
no? And I think in the use cases that are currently being run, it is an ancillary effect that they now can see the differences in the production rates. That then comes down to how you coach that. And we all understand
it's a coaching tool. Yeah,
exactly. And there again, this is another use case that we're seeing quite often, is that yes, it's very valuable to know what the perfect way to cut this is. Yes, it's very valuable to have a much more accurate production rate because of what's being spit out. But let's look at the larger scope of this. Let's say you have a brand new hire, and that hire comes in, you do all the onboarding, and then you're going to send them out to a job site, or you're going to send a crew to a brand new job they've never been on or estimated on. Unless you've got a map and a plan of some kind, you're kind of just letting them go out and
scatter.
And then it's going to take a couple times of them doing it to get all the areas, and then it's going to take them a month to get good at it, and then it's going to take them a year to really do that the same way every time in the way that they have found to do it the best way. If you have the plan already in hand, and you can say, all right, Carlos, you're going to be doing large turf in this. Here's your areas. Here's a little printout of that. These are the areas you can do. And if you want to, you can put that path of motion on there and say, listen, this is probably a good way to try or do it.
But you figure it out. Yeah.
And again,
It's helpful for training too, right?
helpful for training. It's
employees.
helpful for all sorts of things. I mean, you are cutting down the time it takes for
Learning curve.
the learning curve hugely. You could
Yeah.
you can plan all of your entire portfolio of jobs out, have them in binders for the crews, put them in the truck for the crews so they can see them. Again, this isn't where we want them looking at the map like a GPS in their car.
I was going to say like a robot. Like we're not trying to turn humans into robots, but we're
not trying to. And that's the part of this, is that this is where this comes into the use case of it being a very sandbox-like tool. And the other part of this, which is really neat, is that as you plan them out, let's say that you've got 2 crews of 3 guys and 4 crews of 4 guys. So if we're thinking big picture about where you can save money without spending more money, a lot of this can also come down to just how you schedule and what crews you put on certain jobs, right? So now that we've got learned production rates from your crews, you can go back into a plan and you can say, okay, here's my week's schedule, and you have it blocked out with all of these crews and job sites. Well, then you can kind of go back in, because this is such kind of a sandboxy tool. You can change that now from a 4-man to a 3-man and rerun the plans. Now you can put the 2 next to each other, see when they're ending on that day, and you can start to rearrange your calendar based on how you want to prioritize or even assign the crews that you have to the various job sites. Because we can all understand that if you, let's say that you have a 4-man crew, it's going to be run differently and in a shorter period of time than a 3-man crew. Well, maybe that's advantageous on certain jobs based on how your calendar plays out, right? Well, now let's say you go rerun things and you realize, oh, okay, I could actually do a 4-man and a 3-man on this. And then we would end up with a free spot on Friday afternoon where we can stick in another job. So these are all things
powerful.
Yeah,
because I also think, sometimes it's, 2 + 1 = 5. Not great math, but it brings on a job so much more. But then on some jobs, you're tripping over each other. So then, it's hard to, and maybe clients are complaining because you haven't been there the last week due to weather, so you decide to double up, but it actually doesn't help you.
Correct.
And so this, you can look back, so you can try it.
You can try it.
You can even plan it with that, and then try it, and then go, actually, that costs us more work. We're tripping over each other. We're
production
just
went way down for some reason,
And you have an optimization for every property, despite how many or however many people there are. So if there's a crew of normally 4, you have 3 that day. You then have an optimized route for 3, and then if there's 2, you have an optimized route for 2. That's awesome.
And you can do that as well. Let's say, exactly. Let's say you're down a person. Well, have I already run a plan for that? Well, let's take a look. I've run a plan for a 3-man. Oh, look, I got it right here. It's in the binder. Boom. These are going to be the service areas. Okay, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And again, it's also broken up by crew member. And so there's now a lot of ways that we are starting to develop more tools based on just these use cases that we're feeding back in. So the software is continually going to be, as most software, we're going to be adding in features. We're going to be adding in new things that it is planning for, because again, we've had to focus in on the areas that we felt were the most beneficial and most time-saving. As far as landscape maintenance jobs. There's a whole host of other things that landscape maintenance companies do. Pruning, mulching, all sorts of different things that, there are production factors for those as well. Well, how do we know what that actually looks like? Well, we're having a couple companies say, listen, it's raining, but we're sending out a couple crews to go do some pruning. I'd like to see how long it takes them to do it. Awesome. Go throw the vests on. Go do it. All right. Well, now they've done that. Now we can look back and say, okay, this is the area they covered. This is exactly how long it took them to do it. And then we average that out. Let's say they run it a few weeks or they do a bunch of different jobs with pruning. Well, now we've got a pretty accurate averaged production rate. So now when you go to estimate, it's not as much guesswork, or we're not just using the industry standard one that we say, okay, this is just how we figure it out. Because that's been eye-opening as well, and why I really have so much enjoyed getting to work with all these companies. Is my mind, because of the industry that I was in, where it was all very much based on how quickly you can do things, and just very information heavy, and for the crews and stuff, is how operationally each one of these companies works. And it's fascinating because everybody does it different. Every single person and estimating team estimates the way that they charge things like pruning or edging or walking. And you would think it would be more standardized across the industry, and it's certainly not. And so it's very interesting to start digging into that and going, okay, well, then we can start to tweak this and see that. But again, without really understanding what's happening on the job sites, and also not having to have a manager go to these job sites and make sure that things are being done. And then the crews feel like, oh, on this day, I got this guy coming. He's going to be on job site all day, and he's literally going to be watching what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You know, that's a factor in and of itself. So it's got a whole bunch of these ancillary uses that literally daily I am having conversations with the tech team. Hey, we're having an issue here. The production rate on this is going way down. Why? Oh, I can see why, because they have to walk on this side. Okay, so we need to create an algorithm so that when we have that, we can change it to this. So again, this is a constant partnership between the AI processing, which again, we hear AI and we think Terminator, Skynet. Just, it's what happens in our heads, right? Well, and the way that we should be thinking about it is incredibly high processing powered computing. Okay.
Yeah.
And because
I like how you call it a big calculator, and I think that seems less scary than the other thoughts that we have. But we're running close on time. I think we probably need another discussion with you because this is fascinating.
It's fascinating stuff.
But let's jump to the costs.
The costs.
How do you because again, our industry is made up of a lot of small companies.
Sure.
They have expenses. They need to keep on top of their overheads. 100%. This is great, but it's more stuff, more data. How do you price it so that well, you take over that.
Right. So there is a cost involved, obviously, because of the tech involved, right? So this is stuff that is brand new developed things. There has been a lot of cost just developing how we get this tool working.
Yeah.
And there's also the realization that companies can use this in two different ways. So we have the crew planner side, which is all of the planning, which in and of itself is a super useful tool in all the ways we've talked about. We then also have the crew intel side, which is the physical vests and hardware for the equipment, which I could go into a little bit, but again, it's a very little inert tag that goes on the equipment. There's no pairing needed. It's very basic stuff on that end. And also on the vests, it's all integrated so that all they do is plug it in at the end of the night, and they don't have to ever pair or do anything like that. So the pricing, we try and make it as easy and user-friendly as humanly possible, and it's about as easy as it gets in that respect. Compared to a lot of other things that crews are already using. The pricing is that we do it on a subscription base, meaning that it's a year contract for the planning. That planning scales out depending on the acreage
Okay, that's
right?
how.
So
Yeah,
depending
I
on
was
how
gonna
much
say because.
planning they're
Okay.
actually doing, right? So the initial plan counts towards that acreage, and then replanning is just part of the package of the sandboxing portion of that tool. And let me actually pull up so I have the breakdown here in front of me. There it is. So for the planning only, if it's up to 200 acres, it's $150 a month, right? So
Okay.
spanned over that 12 months.
Yeah. Okay.
If it's 200 to 800 acres, or 201, it's 300 a month. And then if it's 801 to 2,000 acres, it's 500 a month. Now that would
But
be
that
for just the planning.
and that makes sense. I mean, again, yeah, a tiered calculation, and I was thinking, is it per person or is it? Yeah. Okay.
It's
So
too
that's the.
complicated to
Yeah.
do it that way because everybody is so varied and different. That the best
Yeah.
way is how much acreage are we talking about? And that really is also a good indicator of how much processing power on the back end Top Green
Yeah.
is doing to make that
Memory,
happen,
all that.
right?
Yeah.
And then of course, obviously, as that ramps up, the price comes down a little bit.
Yeah.
Pretty normal in that respect.
Yeah.
Now, if you do the crew intel, which is all of the vests and all of the individual tags, that is also a lump sum monthly. And it is also a subscription, and it includes the planning. So if you do the vests, everything is all inclusive. We would call that the all-inclusive package.
Okay.
And that depends on the number of crews that you have. So
Okay.
if you have 1 to 5 crews, it's $350 per crew per month.
Okay.
And that $350 includes all of the vests, the charging ports, the hanging racks, any tags that you need for the equipment, and all of that stuff for that crew.
Placements too, if they break.
Exactly. Replacements, the vests are something that will over time need to be replaced. The physical vest, not the what we call the donut, or the portion that is the active portion of what is making crew intel happen. That gets zipped out so that the vest can be washed. Obviously, they get torn up, they get used. You can replace those. That's no big deal. And then obviously any issues that would occur. You need a replacement one, you need more tags for equipment, all those things are part of that. So it's an all-inclusive thing. We don't break it down by individual piece. Right. And then that monthly rate comes down per crew depending on the number of crews.
Okay.
So if it's 6 to 20 crews that you're running this on, then it's $300 a month per crew.
Okay.
If
Yeah.
it's 21 to 50, then it's $250 a month. If it's over 50, which we're working on a company right now that's going to be rolling a lot of these systems out, they're at $200 a month per crew.
Okay.
Right. So
Yeah.
so let's say, per month, if you had 5 crews, running it on 5 crews, so that would be 20 to 25 people, actually 25 to 30 people, and probably 40 to 50, maybe even 100 tags and all of the stuff, you'd be looking at $1,750 a month. And that would include all of the planning and basically everything involved in that.
Yeah.
And that's
Gold standard.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Playing devil's advocate here, what's stopping someone from using it for a year and then just like, okay, we've got our optimization, don't need you anymore?
And we run into that. And as far as just talking point, hey, can't we just use it for a year and then we've got our production rates and we can go from there.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that those shift over time. And what we find is that companies that have done that or done initial pilot programs maybe a couple of years ago that we were utilizing some other versions of this, they would use it for a month and then they'd be like, okay, cool, we got our numbers, we're good. And then they come back like 2-3 months later and they said, oh no, we're all under again.
Yeah.
Well, why?
Okay.
Well, I don't know. Well, why don't you know? Because I don't know what's going on.
You don't have the data.
So again,
that's a good answer.
Right. I mean, and this is it kind of proves itself out because you go, okay, it's great, and we have improved. We have definitely improved. We've used it as a good training tool, but there again, now I need to send people out to make sure it's still happening. Now
Right.
we're starting to slip on where our estimates were. Why? Well, I don't know. Well, why don't you know? because we're basing it off of stuff we did a year ago. Okay, is
Yeah.
it the same crew? Well, a couple people have changed. Well, what's their production rate? Well, it should be this. Well, is it that? I don't know.
Yeah. Plus new clients
So
too. You don't get any of that. Yeah.
exactly. You don't, you could do, a lot of companies are like, well, I'm going to do just the crew planning, and they utilize that, and it is incredibly helpful for them. They can do all the things we talked about with pre-planning so that their estimates are closer. Maybe they're using it to audit the estimates they already have in the system for jobs. They can use it a myriad of different ways. But then when they really want to go, okay, well, how do I know how close we are on our production rates? Why can't we seem to reach this optimized plan? Why is the chasm so wide? Well, this is the way to know. This is how we find that out, right? So again, we've tailored this to be as user-friendly as possible, in that most of the companies that are utilizing this type of software and have these kind of issues that they're trying to solve are already companies that are using vests. So we make it as easy as possible so that there's not some new thing that is different for them to jump a chasm over. And
Right.
that has seemed to be the best way to keep everybody comfortable in kind of how we partner and do this together.
Awesome, Matt.
Awesome.
Well, this is great. I love having you on, love learning about this.
Yeah.
We'll have to continue the conversation again. Thanks for joining Mike and I on this podcast. And yeah, let's keep the conversation going.
Most definitely.
Appreciate it, man.
Thanks for the time. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
Likewise, man.
Matt.
Thank you.
See you again soon.
Yep.